I just want to start first of all by just saying, just thank you for all that you do. I just want to let you know, like, because I haven't really like fully told you, but for me, I've always just had like a deep appreciation of what you do, even though I fully don't know exactly like what you do, but I know the impact that it's had on Jen and other people, and that's why I really wanted to have this conversation with you and just kind of just try to find out more and just try and see what you do and see if it can help anyone else. So yeah, thank you for sharing your time with us. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm like straight into the heart. I'm like, oh, okay.
We got to
No,
start like that.
I appreciate the acknowledgement. And I think, what I heard in that was something that I come up against really often is people are like, I'm not exactly sure what you do, but I know someone that's worked with you and it's made an impact. And for me, like, that's the purpose. Like, I want to support people to, change their lives essentially, and to be more fully who they are. So, you're seeing what happens when someone works with me, and that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Can you maybe introduce yourself and just kind of let everyone know in your words what you do and yeah, what you offer?
Yeah, for sure. It's like my greatest challenge in my work is my elevator pitch.
Yeah.
I'll do my best to try and articulate it in a way that people can understand it. If you've got questions about like anything that I say, please let me know. I know that my partner is always like, babe, no one knows what that is. Like, so at the moment, I call myself a holistic embodiment practitioner. And I work with a range of different modalities. I've just completed a training in neuroaffective touch, which is essentially working with people somatically. So somatics is working with the body. So really the intention of the work that I do is to bring balance and harmony between the body and mind. I work with the 5 bodies. We can go into that if we want to. Some people might know what that is, some people might not. I work very much from a shamanic model, and what I mean by that is the foundations of what I have are of my trainings and of my own personal experience and journey. But when I sit with someone, it's alive. So whatever someone brings into the space, we work with that. And we work with things from breath, meditation, movement, transpersonal practices. So really going behind the mask, behind the veils that we have in our lives, and really being curious and gentle to sort of reveal what's behind there, with a specific focus on working with people that have complex and developmental trauma.
Awesome. That was a lot, but that was good. That was perfect elevator pitch. um, can you let us know a little bit about like somatics? Because for me, I didn't really. I think I've heard of the word just kind of like randomly and stuff, but I kind of looked into it before we had a conversation. Before we were about to have the conversation. Yeah, can you let us know like in terms of the working with the body and the mind, like yeah, just maybe diving a little bit deeper into that so I can get like a better understanding as well.
So I look at somatics in a way of, it's almost like the word somatics and embodiment get thrown around a lot lately. I've noticed there's like a lot of practitioners that are using those words, and it's like, what is this? What do you even mean by this? So when I work with somatics, it's that when we sit together, we're not just going to talk about your feelings and your experiences. We're actually going to bring the body into the room and into the dialogue. So I like to look at it almost as if you went into a therapy session. Imagine you're sitting on one seat, and in front of you, you've got your mind and your body. And your mind and your body are in relationship. And say, for instance, if there's unresolved trauma in the body, or there's challenge in your life and what you're experiencing, perhaps the body and mind have got their arms crossed on the couch and they're facing away from each other, and they're like, no, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to listen to you. I don't believe what you're telling me. And so somatics are a combination of different practices. It can be things like dialoguing, so somatic dialoguing, where we actually open up a dialogue between the mind and the body. It can be contemplations, and so that's like more of a guided process of how do we connect to the sensations in the body and start to understand the languaging of the body. So we can, there's so many different ways, and we're just trying to bring this balance through these processes between the mind and the body. And in the most simple way, that's sort of what I would say somatics is. It's really opening up the wisdom of the body and starting to actually have that on your team and to know that part of yourself more deeply and to understand that there's this wealth of wisdom, that's like an infinite well of wisdom within the body. And it's communicating with us all the time. It's just that often we haven't been taught how to take the time to listen and to hear the messages of the body and to communicate with the body. So that's what I would say it is. The reason I brought embodiment up is because they're often sort of go hand in hand. It's sort of like, when I first started doing this work, maybe like 6 years ago, people were like, oh, people aren't embodied, oh, you're not embodied. I don't believe that people aren't embodied. I think that we're each embodying something right now. Like you and I both now are sitting here, we're each embodying something. And when I say that, there's a somatic term called our shape. So rather than looking at our identity or our ego, it's like, what shape are we taking in the world right now? What shape are we embodying? And our shape can include everything from our belief systems, our conditioning, our cultural context, our genetics, our physiology, the way our nervous system's been wired, our imagination, our psychic abilities, like everything that is who we are right in this moment is the shape that we are embodying right in this moment. And so with somatics, what we can actually do is look at, okay, what's your current shape? What are you currently embodying? What feels challenging or what is overwhelming, and we can understand. My approach is mostly through a nervous system approach, so looking at like polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory. So it's really like I work with people specifically in understanding their nervous system.
Okay.
So I'm just getting to know their nervous system and how to, move from a place of understanding how the nervous system is responding to the world around them and how they can befriend their nervous system and really regulate their nervous system. Somatically, if we work with the nervous system, we actually get the opportunity to reorganize things within ourselves from a physiological perspective, from a psychological perspective, from an energetic perspective, a spiritual perspective, and start to create a new shape and start to embody something new. So it's really, at its most simple essence, it's like it's an opportunity, really.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think I really love the idea of like creating like a certain shape, and everyone has a certain shape, and it's kind of based on essentially everything, not just like literally like the shape of your body, how you're like sitting or anything like that. It's kind of, it has to do with your beliefs, your thoughts, and yeah, that idea is like really interesting to me. With that, is there any way that we can tap into understanding? For me, like I've been actually going through a process of the like last year of actually understanding like even just being grounded and being in my body. I think like for a while it was kind of funny. I was just like, I thought like meditating is like kind of, that's how you get in your body, and then like some people kind of being like, nah, that's kind of like you if you meditate for a while, it's like you're losing that sense of like groundedness and in your body, right? And it was funny because I was just like, oh, I thought that could have been being in your body, and I was like, oh, I need to actually understand or redefine like what really is being in my body, and understanding what is being grounded and what is being embodied. And I think I've been going on a process to try and learn a little bit more of that, and I'm just curious, is there any, I know this is just like one side of it, like your physical like body and stuff, but is there any way that you can kind of understand, certain ideas or traits, like whether you're like, your shoulders are up or if you're having your arms crossed? Is there any sort of things that, like, I guess people can look out for, like kind of inspect within themselves to understand like a little bit more about themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we're looking at this from the perspective of feeling, connected to our bodies and grounded in our bodies, before I answer that, I think it's interesting that you brought up this idea of meditation because, meditation has just taken off in the wellness industry over the past couple of years. And it's just like everyone should be meditating every day, The thing is, the way that I work is that I'm very like human-centered in my approach. And what I mean by that is I work with the individual. So meditation doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And there's so many different kinds of meditation, right? So I think it's important that when looking into any modality or any kind of work, whether it be meditation or doing somatics or embodiment practices or whatever it is, it's actually finding a practitioner that's going to support you as the individual, to find the thing that's going to actually be the most supportive for exactly where you are right now. Because meditation for some people, if someone is really depressed or having extreme anxiety, or maybe they've experienced something really traumatic in their lives, and so they might have PTSD or complex PTSD or something like that, meditation is not something that I would actually recommend for someone that's experiencing anything in those realms, because what often happens in that state is that you're in a state of hypervigilance, and hypervigilance is when our nervous system is in this constant state of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or dissociate. So when we meditate, it can actually feel like we're doing something wrong, or we can be like, something must be wrong with me because meditating is supposed to make me feel relaxed. Meditating is supposed to make me feel grounded. Meditating is supposed to make me feel connected to myself and connected to the universe or God or whatever it is, the creator that we want to, open ourselves to. But the first piece in this journey, I believe, is kind of what you've asked, right? Is like, how do I even know if I'm connected to myself, or how do I connect to myself more so that I can feel grounded, right? The most simple thing that pops into my head is like, what are you eating? Like, if you're not, if you feel ungrounded, you might not even know if you're ungrounded or not. You might not even know this, but things to eat to support you to feel grounded are like root vegetables. And if you eat meat, red meat, doing things like being out in nature and like taking your shoes and socks off, putting your feet in the earth, like feeling the sand, feeling the grass, feeling the dirt. Anything like gardening, like really engaging with the earth are really simple ways, and like eating root vegetables are really simple ways to feel grounded. The journey to discover whether you feel connected and grounded to yourself and in your body is non-linear. And what I mean by that is like, it's like your journey to feel grounded is going to be very different to my journey or someone else's. And so, like because coming into like, okay, how do I feel grounded? It's like, it's about working with someone that can actually support you to connect to what's going to make you as an individual feel grounded.
I think that's so important, like what you're saying, because the idea of like certain steps, and this is like, what you need to do for this moment, and this is kind of what you need to do to reach this certain point. I feel like everything you're saying, I just really love, because I think I always try to push everyone back to connecting with themselves rather than like connecting with a certain form of practice or idea, because like what you're saying, it's like right now something crazy could be happening in my life that I'm having so much stress, and it's like someone else doesn't have that stress because they're at an okay place. So it's like that I need to do something different to someone else, and literally in a second, their life could completely switch, and then they might need to do something different. And it's like it literally could be 5 minutes, and you need to like start being aware and start regulating and kind of connecting with yourself and saying like, what can I do right now to kind of keep me at a certain balance or feel this thing, and then kind of bring it back to balance, you know. And I love that idea of like it being non-linear, because I really there is no certain day and certain moment that you need to do this, certain time you need to do this. It's like there is routines and stuff that you can kind of do to kind of, you know, set some sort of stage or balance for you. But if you're having a crazy month, you know, like you might need to do more of something else, or you need to switch up your approach. And I think that's the most interesting and like beautiful thing about life, is really being able to switch out and switch up and not have the judgment of like, this is what I should be doing because this is what people like, what I have been doing or what people said I should be doing, and just kind of actually going with the flow. But that's why I asked the question of like connecting with yourself, and how can you inspect yourself and find out, because it's all about awareness and understanding, yeah, like where you're at. And I think I just want to add one thing before I throw it back to you. I think it's so interesting what you were saying about like the like connecting and understanding what grounded is, whether you eat certain foods or um, going out in the park and, you know, bare like take your socks and shoes off. I've learnt this recently, and the reason why I believe people don't know if they're grounded or if, you know, if certain food is good for you or bad for you is we're eating, like I'll use the example of food for now. If we're eating a certain type of diet and we're just consistently eating that, and we don't know this from this, like the duality, we're gonna just kind of flow through it and just be like, this is kind of normal, and like you're never gonna know that difference. And I think the only way to know right from wrong, good from bad, is to understand each separately, right? Like if you eat lots of sugar and you eat lots of fruit, you're gonna feel something, and hopefully you can be aware and you can like slow it down and kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna eat like hella sugar. Let me feel how my body feels, and then let me eat, you know, vegetables, fruits, whatever you want to call it, and see how your body feels. You're gonna learn the difference, and I think that's the only way that you can kind of check in with yourself and regulate and be like, okay, I need to balance to here. And that's the same with being grounded or being in your mind. It's like we're kind of always just in and out all the time of like, we could be a little bit grounded, we could be a little bit there, we could be there, until we like stop and really push ourselves to be like, what does this feel like? How can I understand that this is where I'm at and this is kind of the feeling I'm getting? So going kind of extreme, and now when you eat fruits and vegetables, when you start eating sugar again, you're going to be like, damn, that's a difference, that's a big difference. And I think understanding the extremes is important with the whole grounded and being like, you know, connected and being up and, yeah, just like in your mind and stuff. And I feel like, yeah, just tapping in with yourself and really kind of playing the extreme or trying to tap into the awareness of what the extremes are is going to help people understand what grounded is. Because otherwise you could put your shoes off for like 5 seconds or a minute, then go back and be like busy, and it's like you're never going to feel it then. Like you need to slow it down and tap into that awareness, whether it is the food or grounded. But yeah, what do you think about that, I guess, as well?
I have so much that I want to say. I'm
Awesome.
like, yes, Pam. So the first thing that I want to sort of acknowledge in what you just said is this word awareness. That just, you know, you kept saying awareness, and there's a really awesome framework that I learned through Mark Walsh, who's an incredible embodiment coach. He's from the UK. Yeah, he is. And the simple framework is looking at like what are the parts of embodiment essentially. So what are the things that we sort of want to look at of like, how do we know we're embodying something, and how do we like become aware of our what we are embodying, essentially. And so the first part of that is self-awareness, right? So most often, when we've never done any kind of self-inquiry or self-work or had support from anyone outside of our, friends, family, our circle, our self-awareness might not be that great, which is okay because our society hasn't modeled this idea of what it means to be self-aware, unless you're in a unique situation and come from a certain type of family where that was, demonstrated, which is awesome. Like, lucky you. I feel like for myself, it's like this has been a really massive journey. The example I'm thinking of is like when I experienced like some really complex trauma in my teen years, it took me a long time to be like, what's going on? Because I didn't know. I could kind of tell something was off, but I didn't really know. Like I was like, what's happening? So I just kept going about my life. When I started finding all of this work and working with, things like traditional yoga and going and doing, sensual movement, and started doing things like Kundalini dance and somatic practices, my self-awareness started expanding. And so what I mean by self-awareness, and this kind of ties into answering your question of like, what would someone do to sort of start to feel connected to themselves and grounded? The very first question I would get someone to ask, or what I ask my clients is your body ready for us to bring our awareness to it? And if it's for you as an individual, it's like asking yourself, is my body ready for me to bring my awareness to it? Because so many people have gone about their whole lives and never even asked themselves that question, or acknowledge that our body is not this like just this taxi and vehicle for our minds to just go about life, that our bodies are here and alive, and they're just like these really powerful things. So that would be the first question, to actually start this journey towards expanding self-awareness, is like, is my body ready? And you might not even know the answer. Some people are like, yeah, and then we continue to sort of go down the path of like opening that awareness. So it's like, oh shit, stuff's coming up. What do you mean? Like, what's happening? Other people are like, no, I'm not ready. And so we work with that. But that would be the very first question. And ways to start exploring self-awareness are things like doing things like self-inquiry, journaling, right? Actually like allowing free flow from the mind. That's one way. Even journaling your dreams down, like being conscious and aware that there's something happening while you're sleeping that is actually really powerful source of information of what's happening deep in your subconscious. Like dreams are powerful. Like I do dream work, it's powerful. In terms of becoming more self-aware of the body, really simple somatic process of a body scan. It's kind of like, it's used in Shavasana and yogic practice sometimes. A simple body scan. It's like, are you aware of sensation in your body? Are you aware of temperature in your body? Like, if you place one hand in your body, like exploring self-touch, can you actually feel it? And what does it feel like? Because often when we begin this, touching certain parts of the body and bringing awareness to certain parts of the body, it can be like, maybe it's numb, maybe there's pain there, maybe you can just feel on the surface. And the more you expand your self-awareness, particularly working with this way through the body, you can actually start to go beyond the physical sensation of that top layer and start to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And you get to start to get a real sense of like, what are the memories and emotions and the history and the information that's stored in your breath, in your diaphragm, in your organs? And then you can start to open up more things like, looking at meridian points and the energetic lines. Like it's just like infinite, this journey to self-awareness. But like that's the first bit, right? Is self-awareness. Within that framework, which is where I kind of started, it's like there's self-awareness, and then the second part is social awareness. So like, if we can be self-aware humans, we're more likely to be able to show up and be socially aware. And, you know, like, this is such an important conversation to be having right now. So much of the somatic work that I do, and the frameworks and the practices, it's not just about individual introspection. It's how do we look at the self, but also look at the self in the context of the society and the family and the systems, and on the greater scales. Like, it just sort of keeps getting bigger and bigger that we exist in. It's not just this self-fulfilling prophecy of, I just want to be self-aware so I can feel connected to me. So yeah, but what about what's outside of you? So the more that you can connect inward, the more you can actually look outward, and the change that you create inside of yourself can also create change in the social dynamics and community dynamics and systems that we exist in as well. That's kind of the second layer. The next two are sort of like more in depth. So I feel like there's so much, like, how deep do we want to go?
We'll definitely go deep. I just wanted to add on to that. So, what was that? Sorry?
Do you have any questions or like any like reflections for me?
I feel like with that, I love exactly what you said, because to me, this is why I created this show. This is what I'm going to say every show, and people are probably going to hate me because I'm repeating the same thing, but it is the only thing that matters, which is curiosity and questions. It really is. It comes down to, like, if you're trying to build self-awareness, it is self-inquiry. It is asking the right questions and more questions, right? If you ask the same question again and again, you're going to come up with a certain answer, but if you're able to ask a different question that sparks a new aspect, a new way of looking at things, it's going to allow you to now see yourself in a different light. And with the answer that you get from certain questions, that answer is based off other questions you've asked previously in your life, because that's the answers you've got, and now you build onto that answer from the previous answers. So it's so funny, because I think I'm just gonna like repeat this every like show, but it's just, it really comes down to that. It comes down to asking the right questions and asking more questions. And I think for some people it might be like a bit stressful, because it's like, oh, I gotta keep asking questions, but it's like it's just about asking questions and looking at a new way of viewing yourself or the world, and then living in that for a bit and seeing how it helps you and how it supports you, and then being able to shift when it doesn't anymore and ask a new question. And that's kind of the main thing I would really like add on to that, is when people ask about self-awareness and stuff, is it really just comes down to like asking yourself questions. Most of us have not asked ourselves questions, and we don't ask ourselves the hard questions. We try to avoid that, because the answer that we might get might be a bit ugly, or like what you don't want, you know. But for me, then we can tie into like other things of just like non-judgment and just being like, that's where you're at, that's kind of who you are right now, this is where you're at, and it's okay. One thing I'll finish on this like note is, when we talk about the social awareness, I feel like my perspective on it is the only thing you have to do is self-awareness. I really believe that, because when I look at anything, like I'll bring this up as like an example again. This is my phone. You cannot see it, but it is my phone. When I pull out a phone and I look at it, I'm gaining information based on what I know within myself about a phone, right? Like, I'll understand, like, okay, this screen is like this is the metals that they used in this, and this is how the thing operates. It, you know, has transistors and blah blah blah. It has all these things. For you, you're gonna look at it and gain a certain amount of information based on what you know, right? So for me, it's not about understanding the phone and the social and the world. You're only looking at the world based on what you know within yourself. And like, the one example like most people understand and use is when you're talking to someone, or when you are friends with someone, they're reflecting how much they're reflecting you, right? Like, and essentially what you look and see in your friend is what you see in yourself. So for me, I just really believe the greater self-awareness you have, the greater social awareness and world awareness and all of that you will have. You don't need to necessarily identify and kind of figure out the world or people. I really believe if you figure yourself out, you'll figure people out so quickly because you can identify the thing in yourself. So you're going to identify the thing in someone else. And I think that's why I really will push self-awareness like the most, because I do believe like what you're saying is very true, like this social awareness. I just believe it comes from more self-awareness. If you can just figure yourself out and have and be clear about how you see yourself, you're going to be very clear about how you see other people. And yeah, that's kind of how I see the whole self-awareness and why it's ridiculously important.
It's, you know, as I was just hearing you speak, then I was like, I hear what you're saying, right? And it resonates. I think that these frameworks that exist in and these practices, and there's been books and there's talks and all this stuff, and like, you know, I've studied this shit for years, so like I'm like, I'll tell you the framework, and as you were speaking, I'm like, oh, that's right, remember to come back to that, the individual, remember to come back to the self, because and I'm going to share a quite personal example here, because I think when we hear people say, oh, just come back to self, it all starts with self and then we can create social change, I think you don't fully understand the mechanisms of that statement. If you don't fully understand even how to connect to self or to develop your self-inquiry and to expand your self-awareness, that statement can sort of not fully land, right?
Yep, definitely.
I remember the first time my yoga teacher ever said that to me, and I was just like, what? Like, I know what you mean. And, you know, I've been in so many trainings where they're like, you know, we're in silence for days and meditating. And they're like, by you being here, you're changing the world, right? And I'm like, now I'm like, yeah, I am. But before I couldn't really, there was a disconnect in that. So the example that came through for me as you were sharing was my own journey to self-connection and self-awareness through working with a therapist who specialized in trauma. So I spent most of my early 20s not really understanding why my life was so goddamn hard. Like, I'm a very motivated person. I've always prioritized education. I am constantly seeking adventure and connection. And, you know, I love connecting with people, except on the inside, it felt like I was broken. And not many people could see that or knew that. And I just knew, like, something inside of me knew, like, something's going on, what's going on. And so my intuition guided me to this therapist, and she specializes in trauma, but she also does EMDR therapy. And if people don't know what that is, I would highly recommend looking it up. It's a really cool, and not even cool, it's a very powerful way to support people with trauma. I remember my first session with her, and straight away she was just like, oh, you've been having flashbacks. I sort of described what was happening, and I was like, this is what my life kind of looks like. This is what I feel challenged by. It was really hard to even say the words out loud. And she was like, you've been having flashbacks. And in that moment, what I realized was I'd been sexually abused by my first partner when I was a teenager. And it was a horrible relationship. There was so much emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. In my mind, that was normal. And I didn't know any different, but I kind of, part of me, my higher self, knew that that wasn't healthy and okay, but I didn't really talk to anyone about it. I didn't have the resources, the support that I needed. So through getting the right support, through taking the steps to understand myself more, to expand my self-awareness, to heal this trauma that I had, I understood and could see why life had been so challenging. You know, flashbacks didn't have a name before I saw this person. It was like, this is just what my life is, and it's hard. And, you know, to come back to that point of like, if you continue to connect to yourself and expand your own self-awareness, you'll start to understand how you see the world and society. You know, for me, once I'd moved through the part of being so like in that critical point of my journey where life, I felt like I was so isolated in myself. My life felt like it was falling apart. Once I moved through that with the support of the right people, and I wasn't in that critical state anymore, I actually got to start understanding who I was in the world. And before that, it was like, who was I in that relationship? Oh, I was a young woman with a man who physically was a lot stronger than me. So what I got to understand in this journey through my trauma was, I'm a woman existing in this world, and what does that mean? What does it mean to me to be a woman in this world? Oh, actually, it's really common amongst my friends that my friends have also experienced some form of sexual abuse or assault, or, you know, been perpetrated violence because we're women, right? So my awareness of the world started to change. I started to see, oh, this isn't just an isolated incident. This isn't just me. I don't have to carry this shame of, oh my God, this thing happened to me and this doesn't happen to anyone else. I started to understand, like, I'm a woman. What does this mean for me? And then beyond that, got to start having conversations with other women. What are their experiences? How do they engage with the world? What are things that they do to get support? And then I got to start understanding, you know, the systems that create this reality, you know, because I wanted to understand my experience more. It's like, how is this possible? You know, I ended up living in Thailand for a period of time, working at a anti-sex trafficking organization. And I just remember being like, oh, wow, this happens all over the world. Like, this is a really big global problem. Like, women are being trafficked, people are being trafficked, being sold for sex, you know. And so my individual experience, just that step to saying, hey, I'm going to start understanding myself and my experience more. I'm going to start my own healing journey. I want to start to know why I experience things in the way I experience them. Just blew my whole world wide open. And it continues to this day because, you know, as we said before, like, this is non-linear. And when we start to take this self-inquiry journey, who knows where we're going to, you know, get taken. But I think, yeah, like, that was the example that came through when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, like, wow, this journey for me has actually, like, helped me understand my place in this world and the systems that exist because I chose to go inward.
100%. I think, thank you for sharing that, first of all. I hope, someone got something out of it as well. I just think it's so important, like everything you're saying, like, just again, like, the experiences that we have in our life is just, again, to really dive into, it's just asking questions. So, like, I can keep going on about it, but it's just like, it really just comes down to asking the questions and then understanding, like, where to go from there, and how that can help shape you or give you more information about how you choose to be from that situations, you know, from those situations. I want to ask some questions that kind of lead on to some other things. So I know you talked about, like, the holistic side, right? Like, for everyone that doesn't know, holistic is basically just like whole, right? Like, looking at every aspect. So when people talk about, you know, whether it's health or, you know, self-awareness, embodiment, all this kind of things, like, usually, like, people kind of talk about like food and, like, exercise in terms of health, right? Like, and not many people talk about the side which you're talking about, which is the whole, you know, in your body, the mental aspect. And I feel like that should be the most talked about, because it is like, especially our body and our thoughts, is 24 hours a day, every single day. Whereas in you eat a certain portion of the day and you exercise a portion of the day, but it's like as soon as you eat, you could go back to a thought that is not probably beneficial for you, that it's gonna create something within your body and keep that strain or stress in your body. So for me, I believe like I really do believe like the first thing everyone should like dive into when we're learning about health and we're trying to take care of ourselves and um, become healthier, better versions of ourselves is to talk about the thoughts and again our body, like where like I think that it's 100% like connected, right? Like if you have certain thoughts, your breathing is gonna be off and you're gonna hold certain amount of tension in certain places. And I feel like that's the one thing to really like dive into when we start talking about holistically, like, you know, how do we improve our lives. Like I think the first thing is like, let's go to your thoughts, because you could eat the healthiest food, you could start exercising, but if your mentality is I'm not good enough, that's going to create a certain energy in your body that's probably going to deteriorate your body. And no matter how good the food you're eating, like it probably isn't going to be as good because it's 24 hours a day. um yeah, what role do you think, I guess like in terms of the whole somatics thing, like the thoughts and body play into health and yeah, health holistically, like what role does that play?
Oh my God. I mean, so much. When like this idea of a holistic approach, I think at the very beginning I said I like to work with the 5 bodies. And what I meant by that is when I sit with someone, I'm having conversations and I'm inquiring about their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, their spiritual health, and their energetic health. So they're the 5 bodies. When we look at the physical, which is essentially what you're speaking of this mind-body connection, which really have an impact on all 5 bodies, I believe. They're all interlinked. They all
Of
are.
course. Yeah, yeah.
But they're sort of the pillars that you can look at. But what was the example you said? It was like I'm not good enough. Was that the?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not good enough. Yeah. So immediately when I hear I'm not good enough, like if that's the thought that keeps manifesting, what I'm curious about is, that's the thought that's occurring. How are you feeling in your body? Like if that's the thought, how are you feeling in your body? And where's the sensation, right? What that tells me, if someone's having that thought of I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve this, or I'm shit at life, or whatever the thought is, that for me is a manifestation of the way that the body has absorbed and experienced at some point in our lives. So I'll sort of unpack that a little bit. What I mean by that is at some point, say it's I'm not good enough, at some point, and it's usually in our formative years, it's usually from the time we're conceived to the time we're 7, someone taught that person that they weren't good enough. Whether it was through emotional neglect, whether it was through not having their, basic human needs met, whether it was through actually saying the thing to that child, whether it was through their actions. There's so many different ways that they could have, that individual can learn and receive that sort of I'm not good enough, right? What happens is that our bodies organize ourselves. So like if we've had an experience as a child where we'd ask for something from our parent and they turn around and yell and they're like, not now, that little like child's nervous system is going to respond to that experience. And if it's not resolved in that moment, the nervous system organizes itself around that experience. And when I say it organizes itself, it creates these patterns.
Yeah, neural pathways.
It sends messages up to the brain and creates these neural pathways. And it's not just the organization of the nervous system that happens, it actually starts to get absorbed by the organs in our body. And so, say for instance, the emotion of that experience as a child of the parent turning around yelling was sadness, and then the thought associated was I'm not good enough. That sadness is going to be held and stored in the body, and then it's going to keep manifesting until we start looking at what's happening in the body. So the thought can keep happening. It's kind of like, you know, when people are like, say affirmations, then it'll change your thought patterns. It's just like, you can say affirmations till the cows come home. But if you're only doing affirmations and you're only working with the mind and you're not integrating and opening dialogue with the body at the same time, those affirmations are not going to change shit. They might for a period of time, but they're not going to be a sustainable approach to change.
Can I ask something? Because I know you're going to explore that idea.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that. I think if you're just saying affirmations and you're just saying something to think that and feel like it's going to be better, I don't think it's really fixing the problem. But I feel like that has an issue with genuine truth and belief. I don't know if that ties into what you're saying, but like for me, what like my perspective on it is, if you're saying affirmations and you you could be saying like I am enough, but if you don't believe it and you just keep saying it, it's like it's not really gonna do much. But I think if there's a way that you can shift your perspective and you start saying it and you actually genuinely believe it, I believe there is a connection where it can help heal the body. But is that something that you think is like still not enough, and like there's something that needs to happen within the body? Maybe explain like how you feel like, okay, you can say the affirmations and that's not going to do much until this aspect happens. Like, can you explain that?
Yeah, so essentially there needs to be like a resolution. There needs to be, you know, when I say balance and harmony between the mind and body, this is kind of the crux of what I'm talking about, right? So it's like the mind is manifesting this thought of I'm not good enough. That's coming from somewhere. It's not just existing in the mind. It's like, because it feels like it.
Yeah.
It's getting that message from somewhere, and it's coming from the body. Like when someone comes and says that, oh, I can't quiet my mind, these are the thoughts I'm having, this is what keeps happening, I'm like, because it's coming from your body. Like there's stuff coming up from your body, feeding it into your mind, and then your mind feeds how you see the world, right? So, you know, the process I have in mind is like, you know, we'd open up a dialogue. You know, first and foremost, it's understanding like if there's any hypervigilance in the system, because if there is, essentially what that's telling me is like there's a protective mechanism or a protective strategy that someone's been holding for a really long time that's put their nervous system into a state where it's like basically fried, like it's exhausted, and then that can affect things like your adrenals and your kidneys and all sorts of things. We often each have a weak organ based on our early childhood experiences. And so like if you get sick all the time, this is something you can look at. Like, where do I usually get sick? What usually happens? Like for me, it's my kidneys or my sinuses, like without fail. That's my thing. We've all got it. So this is like, that's your body telling you something, right? So, you know, the process would be, okay, I'm not good enough. Bring in the body, asking the body, okay, when I have this thought, bring it into the body and like bring it into the belly, bring it into the chest. What are the sensations that occur when you have this thought? What happens? And I'm telling you, like something will happen. The body will speak to you, and it might be, I'm numb, I can't feel anything. Okay, what that tells me is that there's protection. So let's work with the protection. Does the body feel safe? Yes or no? Well, if it's protecting itself, probably not. Okay, why doesn't it feel safe? If we're sitting like this on a Zoom call, like, and we've got rapport and we've got a relationship, it's just like, well, you're safe, right? Like you're sitting at home, I'm here, we're safe, but your body is saying a different story. So it's starting to peel back the layers. The affirmation piece is almost like you can have the awareness of the thought. It's almost like an interception. It's just like, I'm not good enough. Like often we're not even catching ourselves in thought patterns or the mental loops of I'm not good enough. And then we start clocking it and we're like, oh shit, I start feeling really demotivated when I start having these thoughts that I'm not good enough. And then it starts to affect how I'm showing up in my relationship or how I'm showing up at work. Or actually, I take sick days when this happens, and then I actually end up sick, right? There's these patterns that emerge. You can have that awareness and start intercepting it and being like, okay, I'm having this thought. My affirmation is, I am worthy and deserving of all that life has to offer. Let's say, like I just made that up.
Yeah.
While simultaneously being like, when this is happening, when I'm having this thought, how am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling low energy? Am I feeling sluggish? Is my gut feeling heavy? Am I feeling a contraction in my chest? Is my breathing shallow? What's my body telling me in this moment? Because if I can bring in this new thought pattern, this new affirmation, this new idea of what I deserve, what I believe, that I'm worthy, you can also start bringing the body in. And so if it's, say, the breath gets contracted, say like the breath starts becoming shallow, then start to track the breath. Okay, I'm just breathing really shallow, my chest is contracted. If I put my hand on my chest, what happens? Do my shoulders drop a little bit? Does it feel a little bit restrictive to actually have my hand here and a little bit vulnerable? Because I'm receiving some support in my experience in my body right now. What does it feel like if I change my breath slightly? Now what's my thought happening? So like, and bouncing backwards and forwards, actually allowing that, when I say dialogue, actually being open to, okay, what's happening in the mind now, what's happening in the body, and really taking turns between the two. And then over time, I believe that that's what can create ultimate change.
I think that, yeah, everything you're saying, 100% agree. I think to recognize those patterns, because what you were mentioning is like to become even self-aware of those thoughts, right? You mentioned earlier is to write down your thoughts and just kind of have certain days where you just journal and kind of write down those thoughts, because otherwise we're just kind of busy in our lives that we will say I'm not good enough and then move on to the next thing, and it's like we might not even catch it. And I feel like it's about recognizing these thoughts or patterns, and yeah, one way you can do that is by writing it down, and then essentially everything that you just said just then, which is self-inquiry, like write it down and then say those words, ask yourself how you feel, and that way you at least have a visual on like that's the thing that keeps coming up, or that's my wording or sentence. I always say I believe everyone has a sentence that they have told themselves based on their traumas and their past. But yeah, to be able to recognize it is is the challenge, I guess. Is can you recognize it just by sitting there and thinking about it and just hold it and face it, or some people might need to write it down, but it's definitely about recognizing the pattern, and then you can do essentially what Liv was saying. Um,
Yeah.
can I ask? This is like a bit of a hard topic, and I feel like sometimes it can come across a bit harsh, maybe. But I want to talk about like anxiety and depression, right? Like right now, it's like we're living in a world where that is obviously crazy high. I think more so now because of this whole situation we're in versus like even 2019, 2018, which was already kind of starting to, ramp up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the general consensus of like anxiety and depression, just in the mainstream, or just kind of like what the general consensus, I guess, is that certain people just have it, and it's like it just comes up and it's random. Like you just have it. Like whether it's genetics, whether it's just somehow you just get it, like brain chemical imbalance, blah blah blah. Like it's just there. For me, I just feel like that idea is essentially a bit crazy for me, because every other emotion, we would tie it back to like there's something involved which brings out that emotion, right? Like if you're happy, it's like, why are you happy? Oh, it's because maybe I'm out with my friends, or I'm enjoying time with people, or out in nature. If you're sad, it's like, oh, it's because something happened. Maybe someone passed away. Maybe like something's happened, right? Anger, again, someone betrayed you or did something that made you angry. It's like, but anxiety and depression is like, oh, it's just, I just have it. It's just random. Like there is no other emotion that like is random except for anxiety and depression. And to me, that just is a bit ludicrous for me. So for me, understanding each emotion has a cause and effect, and essentially the effect is the emotion, right? And something triggers that emotion because it's energy in motion, right? So with anxiety and depression, for me, I've always believed it as that is our emotions in general is our soul's compass, which maybe you can tie it back to your body's compass. I feel like you could intertwine those two and essentially say the same thing. I feel like it's your compass, and when you're feeling happy, if you're aware of it, you can understand, okay, like what around me is making me feel this sort of emotion. And if we want to play that with every other emotion, and then let's try and bring it into maybe anxiety and depression, it's like with anxiety, right? Like you don't walk into a room and just be like, oh, I'm just anxious randomly. It's like, let's do the exact same thing that we would do with every other emotion. Is let's be aware. Okay, we walk into a room, let's be aware. What is making you anxious? What are your thoughts? Kind of figuring that out. And then understanding like, okay, it's me showing up in front of people and being my authentic self. That's what's making me anxious. Like I have to speak in front of people. I have to, connect with people, and that's the thing that's making me anxious. And I feel like understanding anxiety and depression are there as a indicator for your soul to recognize you need to get back into balance, or you need to understand this is showing up for you to grow. Whatever way you want to look at it, but it's not just happening to you, but it's happening for you, right? Like it really, you don't get anxious or depressed because of nothingness. It is coming from something. And I think learning to ask the questions or become aware and find out the indicator of why is going to allow you to move in a direction where it can be more in balance or be more authentic. So if we stay on the example of you go into a social setting and you're becoming anxious, if you ask yourself the questions like, is it like, we'll use the example of like, oh, I'm a bit afraid of like being my true self and saying the things I really want to say in this group because I just want them to like me, or whatever it is, right? It's like, if that is the reason why you're anxious, then that's a perfect opportunity for you to grow or be authentic. And it's your body and your soul telling you, don't be anxious, but like essentially you have an opportunity to be your authentic self, or you can feel like this. And it's trying to align yourself back to like, just be authentic, and then like you don't have to feel this way, essentially. Yeah, so for me, I really feel like a lot of these emotions that we feel is connected to something, and it's just about becoming aware, and it's our soul or body trying to align ourselves back to the truest version of ourselves as we can. What are your thoughts on anxiety, depression? What have you seen maybe with clients? And yeah, like based on what I said, do you feel like it's a similar thought process that you have with it, or?
Yeah, so I mean, there's sort of what I'm thinking right now is there's two different ways to look at things like anxiety and depression. There's what I would call a mainstream approach to, I guess, like the way you're referring, there's like a difference between a diagnosis of anxiety and depression and us being in a state of feeling anxious or depressed, right? There's a difference. The difference being that in a more mainstream setting, it has become normalized that we have diagnosis for our experiences. So this started many years ago. There's a manual called the DSM-5, and there's a new edition that comes out every couple of years, and it's a bunch of people in America that sit down at a board table and decide what diagnosis do we want to update into this book. You know, one of the latest, I think, was, I'm pretty sure they've tried to put grief in as something that can be diagnosed. It's super controversial text, but it is used by psychologists, psychiatrists, people in that mainstream medical profession across the world. And so these parts of our human experience have become things that are diagnosable. When I think it's important to understand and know what exists in that book. For me, like when I'm working with people, often they come through a mainstream like approach where they've seen a psychologist, a counselor, a therapist of some nature, or they've been diagnosed by a GP or a psychiatrist or whatever. So for me, it's important to have an understanding of those diagnoses, just so I know where they're
perspective.
at.
Yeah.
That's not the lens or approach that I like to take. It's not that I dismiss that, it's just that I don't see people for a diagnosis. And often, like, there's sort of, I don't believe there's an ultimate answer here, because diagnosis can be something that's super empowering and super supportive to someone, especially if there are things like certain imbalances happening. And they may need the supportive medication. I'm not anti-medication, I'm not pro-medication, but a diagnosis can be super empowering. Like when I was diagnosed with PTSD a couple of years ago, that was really empowering for me. But then I also had to do a lot of work around not defining myself by my diagnosis and being in that narrow scope of this defines who I am. Diagnosis can also be something that is really limiting, because very often people are misdiagnosed. So say, for instance, like with anxiety and depression or grief, like people get diagnosed with these mental health issues, and it's either not the right diagnosis or they're looked in the singular. When someone's experiencing long-term depression or long-term anxiety, it's usually not the only thing that's happening for them, but through this mainstream lens, it's looked at in that way.
Yeah.
But there's probably lots of other things going on. Like I said, the lens and the approach that I take is more from, I guess, what you touched on, is like, if someone's experiencing anxiety, I look at that as an opportunity to get to know that individual and that part of their experience a little better. What does the anxiety feel like in your body? What are the thoughts that are happening? What situations are you in when the anxiety manifests? I think it's also important, you know, is this happening in isolation, or is this happening over a prolonged amount of time? When we look at things that come with these labels, which can either be super freeing or super limiting, looking at things like, is it impacting your ability to show up in your life the way that you want to? Is it impacting your health on all levels? It can be so debilitating for some people, where they can't show up for work, or like, you know, their social anxiety comes so strongly that they actually self-isolate so that they can't put themselves in social situations. And so therefore, I think that looking into that and supporting that more is really important. Whether it needs a diagnosis or not is a different question. I think it's up to the individual. Like I said, for some people, having a diagnosis could be like a relief and be like, oh, wow, okay, I understand and I can know myself better. It can't stop there, though. I think that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Is we get these labels, we get these diagnoses, and it's like, great, here's your diagnosis, here's a pill, or now you know what you've got, now that's it, and then that's the end of the road. In my opinion, that's not enough. There needs to be a support, like a map of how to know oneself better, to build resilience, to actually really move through this challenge. You know, the example that you gave of the idea of like going and seeing a group of friends and feeling that anxiety, I think, I mean, is a fantastic example for the world that we're living in right now, with so many people coming out of isolation and having an opportunity to reintegrate back into society in whatever way they choose. But that example to me, so when I think of that, I'm like, okay, so there's the emotion or the feeling of being anxious. How do we create safety for ourselves and feel connected to ourselves so that we can authentically express? You know, there's the social part of our nervous system, which basically starts at the base of our neck, and it sort of encompasses our eyes, our mouth, our ears, our face. It's like the outward facing aspect of our nervous system. It's the receptor of like all our world around us. You know, if I think of that example, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so when we're in a social situation, our nervous system, this social part of the nervous system, is basically picking up all of the information around us, trying to find a way so that we can respond to our external circumstances so that we can belong and we can feel safe. Like it's a survival mechanism, right? So it's like, am I dressed the same? Do I sound the same? You know, do I look the same? How can I fit in here? And so really it's like, how do we regulate ourselves in a way where we can regulate that part of the nervous system, because otherwise we just end up being, you know, these little puppets, and we all just end up dressing and looking the same, and we can't have conversations and challenge one another because our nervous systems are like, no, I can't say that because I'm going to be rejected from the tribe.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that part. It's like, how do we regulate ourselves and hold that sense of like, I can still belong and look and sound different, so I can authentically express myself. And what's my relationship with anxiety? Like, what's my relationship with this emotion? Because emotions for me are just on a spectrum. There's no good or bad. You know, some might feel more comfortable, some might feel uncomfortable. For some people, feeling a true expression of love and joy could be really uncomfortable. Whereas feeling depression and anxiety could be comfortable because it's what people are used to. Whereas for others, it can be the opposite. It can be depression, anxiety. It's so uncomfortable. Don't want to do this. Life is so hard. Like, how do I stop feeling this way? I just want to feel joy. I just want to feel pleasure. I just want to feel excitement and optimism and all of the like the lighter emotions. Building our emotional intelligence in all of this is so important, because it's starting to forge healthy relationships with all emotions, so that there's no good or bad. It's just, they just are. We can just be in this like transient state. It's like, oh, this is an emotion that's coming up, allowing ourselves to fully feel it, move through, and just experience it, and then keep going on with our lives.
I definitely feel like what you're saying is like super important, is not judging the emotion or like what's coming up. And that's why I always try to bring it back to like there's an opportunity to like understand yourself a little bit more through each experience, right? And that's the reason why I believe we have emotions, is to teach us about ourselves, and is not for the sake, at least for me, it's like, it's not for the sake of just experience for experience, but it's like ultimately you experience something to gain something. And it's, some people might look at it as like oh, you gain something, but it's like, it just happens. You don't have to do anything. Like, you will gain something from an experience, right? It's not like specifically like I need to gain something, but um yeah, the non-judgment of each emotion and just letting it play out, understanding it, being aware. And that's why I speak about when you have anxiety, whether it's with your friends and stuff, it gives you an opportunity to learn about yourself. And I feel like that's how I always look at it, is that soul compass, being like, hey, like, check in with yourself. There's this experience you're feeling, like, you have an opportunity to find out more about yourself, whether it is learning about, you know, your past, your future, your present, like whatever it is. It's just an opportunity for you to expand your awareness. And again, it comes down to authenticity, but I think you could either say as well, like, to expand your awareness of who you truly are. Um, but yeah, I do agree with what you're saying in terms of like the diagnosis part of like holding on to it as like this is it, and cool, like okay, this is my diagnosis, I will continue just living life based on that and kind of limiting that. So the reason I speak on this, and I want to kind of bring these kind of ideas up, is I believe that it's not it's not the diagnosis, or how do I say it? It's like it has nothing to do with like, let's say, the diagnosis of like, or why anxiety or whatever. It has to do with, when I say anxiety, what is your thoughts around anxiety, right? Like if you believe it's something that has to happen and it's within you and there's no way of changing it, that I feel like that's the issue, right? You could be diagnosed with anything, but if you believe like, oh, that's kind of what I am going through, what I have, but there's an ability to change it, I believe that's perfect. Like what you said, if that helps people and that helps people identify a certain aspect of themselves, I think that's great. I just think it's like, what is the identification with it? Is it, okay, this is me and this is what I have? Like, oh, I have an arm, is the same way you have anxiety? Or is it, I have anxiety the same way that I am hungry? Which is, there's a way to like to change that feeling. You know, you could eat food and become less hungry. It's like I have anxiety, but it's like you could do something to regulate that anxiety. And I feel like that's an interesting thing where I would like hope everyone would think about it, is like these words and being like, what does it really mean? And like, is it a changeable thing? Is it static? Is it, because that's why I asked the question of like, everything else isn't static. Every other emotion, we don't say we're constantly happy, we don't say we're constantly sad, we don't say we're constantly anything. But it's like, how can we constantly be anxious? Like we can't say I have anxiety as like the, this is it forever and ever. It's just like, no, you get anxious and then you can kind of go down. You might be more anxious more often, you might be hungry more often, but you just need to eat. Like, you know, like some people could be hungry more often and someone could diagnose them and be like, you're hungry. But let's kind of understand what hungry really means, the same way that we need to understand anxiety, depression, because again, like if we want to go in the depression route, it's like, I understand when people are depressed. Like there's a reason for people being depressed, right? Like there's something that is happening in their lives that is making them feel that in some way, shape, or form. It's just whether we can truly understand and be truthful and aware and kind of really understand it. And I think it's okay to be any of these feelings. Like what you said, you have to respect and honor whatever emotion that comes through. But I really believe in the idea of like understanding that it's not like a thing that you physically have, like, oh, this is like anxiety is right here and this is my fingers. Like it's not just there. It's like you can change it. It's the same as the other emotions, where it goes up and down based on the sudden input and output of your life, whether it is, you know, your thoughts and, you know, what's coming out. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I like to think of emotions and our human experience almost in the way that I observe nature. You know, we are innately nature, and so when you look out at the sky, it's like the sky always really blue with some shining.
Exactly.
Whereas sometimes it's so scalding hot that you feel like your face is going to melt off, or it's like crazy storming and wild and thunder and flooding. And then there's rage fires, and then there's, you know, the great freeze, and like, you know, nature is wild and untamed and constantly in flux, constantly changing, and there's it just is, right? And I guess for me, my own journey with, you know, understanding and building these relationships with emotions, like I remember when I was 14, I went to the doctor. My mum took me to the doctor, and I was told by my GP that I had anxiety and that I had to take these pills every single day, and that I would probably have to take this every single day for the rest of my life. And at 14, I knew, I was like, that's not true. That can't be true. Yeah. I was like, I was distressed as a 14-year-old that didn't know any better, that was, you know, trusting in you know, that my mum was doing her best and what she thought was the right thing to do, I was really distressed. But at 18, when I had sort of grown up a little bit, I stopped taking that medication because I thought there is no way that someone should have to take something for their whole lives. There must be another way. And oh, a fly just flew into my face.
I saw that.
Speaking of nature, yeah, and so, you know, like, my relationship with nature has been a big part of my journey, in that I've always tried to stay connected to it. And so, you know, I think when I was younger, I used to be like, oh God, it's raining and it's freezing cold, or like it's too hot, or I'd complain about the weather. Whereas now I fully embrace everything that nature's doing. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, I love the rain so much. Isn't it so amazing that I can sit inside in my house and watch this rain pouring? And it's similar to my emotions, because I've been on this journey for a while. It's like, I'm feeling grief. Okay, what do I need to do to support myself so I can fully just feel this grief and move through? Oh, actually, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. What can I do to actually, you know, allow myself to fully feel the anxiety? I think that a lot of challenge and a lot of the problems come from the fact that we suppress our emotions. So it's, you know, it's one thing to say, let's build a relationship, or know that it's there for a reason, or that we can actually learn something from the emotion. But when I say build a relationship, I mean so that there's neutrality around each emotion. It's like there's oh, okay, it's anxiety is coming up right now. Instead of shutting down and freaking out that you're feeling anxious, can you, from this really like grounded place, allow yourself to feel the anxiety and move with it, and knowing that it's not forever. You know, nothing is forever, and it doesn't have to be. And that comes from our belief systems too. Like, that was something I was taught. Like, at 14, you're going to have to take this pill forever. Okay. I could have taken that on, but I didn't. And I've also had like multiple people in my life say things, you know, as if they're a forever statement, but nothing is forever.
Yeah. I think that's the best, like, understanding. Just like in nature, it's like nothing is forever. So it's like, why does anything in our life is like have to be forever or stay a certain way and be static? It's like we have to understand that we're just exactly like nature. And everything you just said, 100% agree, especially in terms of the weather. I think that's a perfect like analogy as well, because yeah, I think it just fits so well. As we end up here, I just want to like leave you with the thought of kind of just maybe talking a little bit about resilience through any of these situations that we're going through right now, or just, you know, dealing with certain emotions and kind of understanding it, self-awareness, all of that, like the idea of resilience and just kind of keep moving through. Like, what do you think, or what would you like to share, I guess?
I love resilience. I'm so happy that you brought this up. Yeah, okay, resilience is something that I truly believe is this like untapped resource in human beings, and has been twisted and manipulated by so many people in the world. So essentially, like, the way that I look at resilience is, of course, through a somatic lens. And what that means is, rather than just saying, okay, I feel resilient, what do you feel when you're resilient? In our bodies, right? So for me, and what the research shows, is that somatically, when we're connected to a state of resilience, we feel grounded in our bodies, we feel open, we feel hopeful, we feel calm, but we're connected to the energy of life moving through, and we have the ability to access our imagination. If you're going through something really challenging, connecting to a state of resilience allows you to use your imagination and connect to that state of hope that something can be different than your current reality, than your now. And it's a really interesting combination of feelings in the body, right? Because it's, you're feeling grounded, so you're like, oh, I'm here, I'm connected, I'm with myself. But there's an aliveness, there's that energy of being open as well, and feeling, I would say, life force, or like the energy of life, that current that moves through us, that lets us know we're alive and we're here. It's like we can connect to that when we're resilient. Resilience is something that is, I believe, we can cultivate. It's not like we're born and then we're given a cup of resilience and it's like, okay, so only take little sips when you go through challenges because you're going to run out and then you're not going to be able to connect to that state of resilience anymore. It's something we can cultivate. And I think this is something that I see so often, is that people only connect to their state of resilience in times of challenge. And so therefore it's like that cup feels depleted. That cup feels like it's not full. And so we have to dig deep to actually be connected to our state of resilience to get us through and be like, I have to get through this. I have to move forward. Whereas if we cultivate it and we connect to that state of resilience with awareness in our everyday lives or on a regular basis, when we go through challenge, it doesn't knock us so much. You know, so often I see this like pendulum that people go through of like, you know, everything's so great and amazing, and then a challenge happens and it's just like their whole life stops, or it feels like their life's imploding. I think if we cultivate a state of resilience on a regular basis, our ability to manage challenge and to move through challenge comes from a much more centered and grounded place. It doesn't make us feel like the whole world's over. It doesn't make us feel like our lives are going to end and that we can't do it. You know, there's the ways that I will, like, that's been shown in research, but the ways that I connect to my state of resilience, and these are all things that people can do because they're free, are mindfulness. So actually connecting to the present moment, no matter what you're doing. Art, some form of art practice. And when I say art, I know that people are probably like, I'm not an artist. It's like, we all have the ability to be creative. Yeah. So whatever it is that you're drawn to and whatever creative expression that feels good for you, do that. Movement, particularly dance, you know, again, you do not have to be a trained dancer. You can dance, like you see it, music put on, and a baby who has never had a dance lesson in their life, they will start dancing to that music. Like, exactly. That expression of movement is innate within us as human beings. We just have to reconnect to it and let go of that conditioning of like, I can't, I'm not trained, I don't know how, and just like allow ourselves to move. And connection to nature. And there's one other one. So connection to nature could be like, put more plants in your house. You know, make your home like this sanctuary where you can actually feel connected to nature. Like, spend time and put energy into carving out time to go and be in nature. And also the final one is having at least one healthy relationship with another person, where you feel a sense of safety, you feel seen, you feel respected, your needs are met in that relationship dynamic. And also connecting to your purpose. And by that, I mean, like, what are you doing to support others in the world? Because when we do something to support someone else in the world, that's when we feel resilient. So these are probably things that everyone does on some level, because they're all things that are really quite simple, you know, and they're not these hard, it's not like, okay, you've got to sit and meditate to connect to your resilience if someone's never meditated in their lives. It's like, out of that list, I think there's like, you know, 5 or 6 things I said there. Surely there's one on there that like you do, and maybe you don't realize at the moment that that's supporting you to build your resilience, but this is where the awareness piece comes in, of when you're doing that thing next, whether it be painting or going for a walk on the beach or having a conversation with your favorite person, where you're just like, bouncing off each other, kind of like we are now. It's just like, you know, it's like, cool. It's like, what does that feel like in your body? Notice what are the quality of your thoughts while this is happening? What's happening in your body? And following that, because those times you're actually able to cultivate it and connect to it, so that when you are going through challenge, you can start to connect to it and bring it in those moments. There's a really beautiful practice, actually. There's two. There's a somatic practice where you can actually bring an example of a time where you felt that connected, like to that state of resilience, and you actually just meditate with that. So you actually just bring that memory and experience into your body, and you allow yourself to feel it, and you just sit with it. And that's all you have to do. And then another one is, if resilience is something that's new to people and they haven't really ever explored it, a really good place to start is almost like a mind map. So start with resilience in the center, and rather than going and being like, what are things that Liv said or my therapist said or someone else said that I'm supposed to do that help me cultivate resilience, I think people need to start looking at what they already do and what already exists, rather than having to add more and more and more. It's like, simplify things, people. Like, stop adding more to the to-do list. So, you know, create that mind map and write down all of the things that help you feel either grounded, hopeful, connect you to your imagination, allow you to feel open. Write down the things that exist in your life already, and you might be surprised at what you've already got. If you're stuck, well, then I would say that you probably need a little bit of support, but that's okay. We all need support at different points in our lives.
For sure, for sure. Awesome. I think that was like a lot of information that I think people can take left, right, and center, and just kind of, whether it's certain practices. Yeah, I think that was really good. With the idea, I really like the part where you were talking about the imagination part of resilience, because that's the way I see it too, is having that ability or that driving force of imagination, because again, it opens up possibility. And I think the only reason you want to keep moving forward is there's some possibility of something that you might like in the future, or what, again, a possibility or a ability to say what if. And I think that's super important, is understanding that what if and opening up that possibility. And again, it's like, it's through questions and stuff, but it's through imagination, which I think I love that sort of idea, because yeah, if you can imagine something else, then you have at least some level of resilience within you to like really create that, or kind of step into that world or that life. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for everything. I want to end it on, I want to start this thing at the end of each like show, is basically for you to just maybe have a certain question that you've been kind of thinking about, pondering, having questions, and kind of maybe you're not too sure, and then like for people to like comment or just kind of share links or share ideas and thoughts on whatever your question is. So what's a question that you've been kind of either struggling with, or just you just have a question, you're like, damn, like yeah, I just want to find out more information about that, like, yeah.
My question is super existential.
I love it. That's what we want.
So this year for me, on a really personal level, has challenged my idea of what truth is. You know, and it's been compounded by everything that's been happening with COVID. You know, I have so many different people around me that have different views of the world. I myself continue to change the way that I see the world. And you know, about midway through this year, I thought I knew something about my relationship with my dad, and then I was handed a piece of information and it changed my entire story around it. And so this idea of truth has been a really big theme that keeps emerging. And in the times of challenge, like when I've probably been at my lowest points this year, I keep finding myself asking, like, what is the truth? And it can be it can be in relation to anything. It started off as, I don't know what the truth is anymore. That's where I started, you know, a couple months ago. I was like, I don't know what the truth is anymore. Like, should I go and live off grid because the world is ending? Like, should I, you know, just continue going the way I am because that's just a conspiracy theory? Like, you know, there's everything in that. But then also, I don't know what the truth is anymore. Have I been lied to by my family? Is what they said true? Is it not true? Have I been lying to myself? Like, wow, my brain's a powerful thing. If that's been the case for the past 30 years of my life, whoa, I might have multiple personality disorder. You know, so that there's been so much in my mind and in my experience around, starting of like, I don't know what the truth is anymore in relation to so much, and seeing myself and so many others seeking answers of being like, if I can just find the truth, then my challenge won't be my challenge anymore. As I sort of have been on that journey, I've realized, oh, okay, there's no actual absolute truth. But I keep getting the question, what is the truth? And I think it's a really important question.
I do. I think it's awesome. I'm keen to see if like, people say anything or give any links or ideas or, that's a great question. I think that's an amazing question to end on. So what is the truth? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate just having the time to share some of my views of the world and some of my experiences. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.